You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Gus Dimopoulos, managing partner at Dimopoulos Bruggeman in Westchester, New York, focusing on matrimonial law. Gus, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Benny. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. A lot of cool things to talk about. Before we jump into your story, we just want to give a shout out to Lex Reception. Attorneys and law firms out there, switch off knowing your calls are going to be covered by Lex Reception. From answering calls and messages in real time to appointment scheduling, your clients are going to receive the care and support they need with Lex Reception. Their legal answering specialists are on hand 24/7, so you'll never miss a call or a future case. With custom scripting and software that can seamlessly integrate with your current workflow, Lex will make sure every client gets fantastic service, and we are offering for Lawyer Stories listeners $250 off your first month. So there's no better time to get started. Shout out to the team over there. Very nice people. Let me know if you have any questions. We'd love to hook it up. All right, Gus, back to you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for waiting through that. So we haven't featured you on Lawyer Stories yet on our Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Shared your story with our community, but you do have an interesting story in how you sort of were brought to the law a little bit. So you started your story that you share that you were your parents were Greek immigrants and your dad was a house painter. And I think that story sort of ignited something in you, and I'd love for you to share it.
Yeah, I think Benny, people become lawyers for millions of different reasons. For me, it was growing up. So the story kind of goes like this: Greek immigrants, Queens, New York. I don't know where people are from, but figure. We're out on the outskirts of Manhattan. Queens back in the day was not affluent whatsoever. And my father's painting houses and gets an opportunity to move us up to the suburbs of Westchester and does it. Him and my mom somehow bring me and my two sisters up there, buy a house, do the whole thing. And, it's funny. I don't know if anyone's ever seen he'd probably be pissed if I told it this way, but it was the Beverly Hillbillies. I mean,
Yeah.
it really was. And I mean it with love. I do.
Yep.
But there was a, 68 Chevy Suburban, towing a hitch with suitcases and stuff. And he brought us up to the suburbs and we
But did
grew
you
up.
feel that way back then? Like, did you know, like,
I was mortified. I was
oh, so you did
absolutely.
know. Okay. So it wasn't like something you look back on and we're like, hey, we're like the Beverly Hillbillies. Okay.
And just so you know, there's absolutely zero shame in telling the story. I was mortified. I remember going through the Triborough is a bridge between Queens and the Bronx. And back then it was you threw three quarters in the dispenser to get over. And I remember my father missing with
Oh,
the whole system there. And I
yep.
was embarrassed. So, you're a kid. You don't know any better. As an adult, you look back and you're like, man, how'd you do that? Like, how did you manage all that? Good for you for taking that chance.
Yeah.
But then I
Yeah.
was embarrassed. And we move up to this house in not only Westchester, but Scarsdale, which is like the ritziest part of it.
Yeah.
So no business being there. He did it. My mom, cut every corner, did everything she had to do. My sisters and I were educated in, one of the best high schools in Westchester. And anyway, you know, growing up here, I grew up with kids whose parents were lawyers in big law firms and had these amazing jobs, and I got a chance to see how you know, you get a little educated, you work hard, what you can do. And I kind of saw my old man as a house painter getting, a little mistreated now and again. Um, one particular story was he paints the house of a couple that were two lawyers,
Hmm.
and maybe something went wrong, the job didn't go so well, and they dragged him into court. Um, this is a little Greek immigrant, didn't know how to write his name, and two
Wow.
lawyers took advantage of him and sue him. And I'll never forget he hired a lawyer, and shout out to Sandy Kurtz. I don't even know if she's still alive,
Mm.
but she represented him, and they fought it out. He felt that he did nothing wrong, and they nearly bankrupted the guy over a simple painting job. And I said, you know what? There's something fundamentally wrong with being able to treat someone like that. Who, had he done something wrong, it's one thing, but anyway, the case ended up settling. He withstood it. Thank God for Sandy sticking by him. And I remember being a kid and saying, there's just something not right with that. And I
Mm.
wanted to look further into being a lawyer. And that's kind of my story.
And then you never met a bully that you didn't want to punch in the face.
No, no,
That's
and
funny.
I won't mention their names, but I remember these people's names. I remember my father, practically in tears, having to make court appearances. Like, I didn't do what they said that they did, but they've got all this money and they're representing themselves and they're paying lawyers, and I said, you know what, that's just not right, and that really truly made me, if you're going to use money and power to take advantage of a common person, it makes me sick. So
Like, what
yeah,
did they think they
I'm
were
a,
going to get out of your dad anyway? You know what
they
I mean?
wanted
It's
to do
not
the
like,
job for free, Benny.
yeah, that's just. But with all that money, I mean, it's crazy. You know what I mean? How do you? I mean, it's I don't know. It just seems like a lot to go
You,
through
you you
for.
see it, you see it now, right? You see it in
Yeah,
today's day and age in movies. People say, "Well, lawyer up," because I'm gonna, use my power, my money
right.
to lawyer up. Well, not always.
So your parents must be very proud. I mean, you went to NYU, Fordham Law. So what was it like the process getting into those schools and undergrad to law school?
It's funny. I have a daughter who's applying to college this year.
Really, congrats.
And like so many people whose kids are going to college, there's so much going on. They have all these applications and these college. Man, I applied to one college.
Yep. Wow.
I knew I wanted to be in the city. I knew I wanted to get going on a career. I was lucky enough to get into NYU. I worked through most of college. Um, my speaking of my old man, he told all his friends with pride that his son went to MIU because he didn't he didn't know what it stood for.
MIU. Okay. That's
So
funny.
no, it was great. It was great. It was wonderful. Great education. Um, Being in the city was terrific because there was always internships and jobs I could do. I wasn't in the middle of nowhere, but it was wonderful.
So why matrimonial law?
I think it has a lot to do with the stand up to the bully thing.
Yep.
I look back, right, 25, almost 25 years into it, why it turned that way. And the truth of the matter is, it's not always so elegant and the path isn't so clear. Um, I worked for a big firm. I then, lateraled to a mid-sized firm doing corporate litigation, and ultimately ended up working for a small place that did a little bit of matrimonial.
Okay.
And I got involved in one, and uh, it was so rewarding to handle an individual, not a company. I
Yep.
mean, we represented the big firm, Avis Rent a Car, Budget Rent a Car, some huge, private equity conglomerates. And it's like, it wasn't human to me. And when the first
Right.
time I represented a person, it was different.
It's
It was
different,
wrong.
right? It's different. And you've had your practice for 21 years. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's that's uh that's pretty amazing. I mean, because you said you had like maybe 4 years where you were doing other things. You got some other other experience? Like, how did you know it was time to launch a firm?
Uh, I launched the firm way before I should have.
Okay.
To be perfectly honest with you, I probably did it too early in retrospect. I went and um, I went and worked kind of for and with someone who was much older,
Okay.
um, and kind of got a little bit of hands-on experience. He mentored me, and then I just said, I just want to do this on my own. And if I had more brains, Benny, I probably wouldn't have done it, but thank God I did.
Yeah.
To
Well,
be honest with you,
yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it as early as I did. But it worked out for me. And the truth of the matter is, what I would tell someone young is, when you are trying to do it on your own, if you have the time to really truly study what you're doing, because you don't know what you're doing when you're young and you're
Right.
3, 4 years out. You got to be careful, but
Mm,
always have people that you can call and lean on and say,
right.
hey, listen, I got something. Maybe I understand the law, but I'm not understanding the strategy or the mechanics of it. Have people you can call on. And older lawyers, Benny, they're always willing to lend a hand.
I love that, by the way, what you just said. You might understand the law, but you might not get the strategy and mechanics behind it. That's like maybe what law school leaves out sometimes, right? Like the strategies, the mechanic, like people can, write an essay or whatever. But that's really interesting. So have an older attorney who's been at the courts, who's processed and done the same type of case.
Yeah.
I mean, every case, different facts, but that sort of thing, right?
Look, in matrimonial law, right? You could be 100% right about an issue, 100%, right? So you represent someone who's got tons of money, and that person could very well ask for X, Y, and Z. But
Hmm.
optically, what does it look like if he or she does? Um, you know, what does the judge see of the overall case? Should you do it? You could do it legally. You've got the right to do it. But if you made all your decisions based upon statutes and exactly what you should do, you're missing how a judge views a case. And not only that, but in my line of work, how does the family get through this, right? Like, if
Right,
I make a big deal out of this one little thing, legally I'm right, but what does that do to my kids? What does that do to my
right.
spouse? You got to think of the whole thing.
And it's interesting, Gus, because you talk about, how does the judge view the case? Like, there's literally AI legal tech resources out there now that will like tell you down to like how the judge like ruled on a case or just synthesize all that material for you. So that's pretty interesting, that you said that.
You can't do it for matrimonial though, Benny, because every single case is different. So yeah, you can get what's temporary maintenance, or what people call alimony, for someone who makes 300,000 and the other person makes 80,000. Yeah, you can get that answer, but every case is personalities,
Mm,
every case is optics, every case is, what the judge views, so you have to understand optics and strategy in matrimonial, and that's why I say talk to older people, talk to more experienced people, because they may say, you know what, Benny, you're right. You could do that. But if you do, this is what's going to then happen.
yeah.
You got to get that.
That's interesting. Okay, yeah. So, and I think a piece of this that we're going to talk about now, moving on to social media. You've launched a campaign to end the weaponization of social media in custody cases. So tell us just generally, like why this is important to you.
It's important to all of us, Benny. And let me just explain why. So anybody who hears about divorce cases, you understand it's emotionally charged. You understand people are passionate, people are angry, people are at the worst points in their lives, right? So you've got an ongoing divorce case, and I'm only talking about cases that involve children, okay? And people take to social media all the time. I mean, regular people, not lawyers, nothing to do with what I do for a living. They take their gripes to social media. You go to a restaurant that doesn't treat you right and you bash them on Yelp,
Right.
or a million other things. Okay.
Right.
Now, take a divorce case. You're angry. Someone's not letting you see kids. Somebody wants to get money that they shouldn't get, or doesn't want to give money they should give. And people start to put stuff on social media. And
Right.
I've had some personal experiences in cases, and everybody who does what I do has, and they've blown up and they've been picked up by influencers and TikTokers. And what ends up happening, Benny, is this stuff is really fodder for people, because divorce is just a topic that people love to hear about and talk about and gossip about. And what ends up happening is this stuff gets back to the kids. And you got 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids who are just getting into social media, who are either seeing it themselves, their parents bickering on social media, or getting it from one of their friends. A video gets picked up, somebody catches someone cheating, posts something. And what ends up happening, and not to get too serious and too sad, but there have been situations where children have literally committed suicide over embarrassment on social media, related to their parents bickering on divorce. So in my article, I talk about, number one, social media in general amongst kids. It's
Mm-hmm.
exploding, and it's causing anxiety and depression rates in children to skyrocket. The statistics are staggering. I'm not going to bore you. They are alarming. Another statistic is that children of divorce in general exhibit higher rates of anxiety and depression. Um, they have worse relationships. So when you take these two groups, these two high risk groups, right? Kids in general experiencing social media, children of divorce, you combine them, their parents weaponize their divorce postings, their social media postings,
Mm-hmm.
and you're having some really horrific outcomes. So to close it out, my campaign is basically saying, look, courts, put an end to this. If you have kids in a divorce, you got to just put a complete ban on social media posting that specifically discusses this divorce, your spouse, or your kids.
So what kind of a so is the banning of a post, and we'll get into the First Amendment soon, but is the banning of the post, like, does that become a slippery slope? You know, like, if the I know the judges haven't, I don't know if, I know there is a judge who did something about it in a case, but like, what would it take? Like, what would the post have to say in order to be banned, or the
It,
reel, or whatever it is, TikTok?
it's an awesome question. So yeah, we have to be careful, okay? And the beauty of it is that we don't really need to analyze it, because the appellate courts in New York already have. So there have been
Right.
two huge cases.
Two big cases. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So what the court basically said is, look, if the court issues a prohibition on posting, okay, number one, the prohibition has to be what the court's called narrowly tailored.
Hmm.
Okay. It means it can't say any and all. It can't say any posting about anything. It's got to be really drafted in a narrow way. It has to be, it has to be drafted in such a way where it's accomplishing a goal, prohibiting a harm. So that's where the kids come in. So if you have a narrowly tailored order that is meant to protect children, it's not constitutionally impermissible. Yes, you are, Benny, going to get to the point where they're going to say, well, this post isn't bad, but this one is.
Right.
Okay. You're never going to have a straight answer. But, for all of us lawyers, has there ever been a clear answer on the First Amendment in any?
No.
Never.
Right. Um, so, like, why do you think the New York State courts haven't already, done something about it? I know we do talk about, there are a couple cases, one of them that you were involved in, that they haven't really put those prohibitions on there. And also, what would happen if a person violated it?
Well, let me pose a scenario to you, right? You're
Yeah.
not a matrimonial lawyer, right? You're not a
Nope.
child custody expert, and I'll ask you a question. if I'm a parent at home and it's my time with my kid, and I say to that kid, I'm not going to use vulgar language, but I say to that child who's 10 or 11 or 12, your mother is a blank.
Yeah.
We can all agree that that's a horrible thing to say, right?
Mhm.
You shouldn't say it. And we could all agree that a court, which they will, prohibit a parent from doing that again, right? So why is that comment on social media a First Amendment analysis, right? What happens when it becomes what goes from talking about a direct comment in front of a child that's harmful and then putting it online? Something interesting happens.
Okay.
And what happens is the courts start to say, "Oh, let's really consider our First Amendment rights." Guess what? For 80 years of jurisprudence, divorce courts have told parents don't disparage the other spouse in front of the child, and we could
Right.
all agree that's wrong. So what changes? What changes is this concept of freedom of speech and social media posting, that it gives you some greater right than you have in society. And I think people in general feel that they can be able to write whatever they want on social media. We're seeing this play out on X. We're seeing this play out all over the place. And the answer is, yeah, I'm a First Amendment advocate. I think people should be able to say whatever they want. It's different when there are kids involved. It
Okay.
is different. That's the factor that plays into my campaign. And that's what's different. You can say whatever you want about conflicts in the, around the world. You can say whatever you want about the government, but when your comment hurts a child and causes a child to be depressed or want to harm him or herself, I don't care about your First Amendment right as much anymore.
So does the kid, is the idea that the child has to actually see the post and there has to be some damage, or is it just that it was put out there?
It's a good question. And I would turn to anybody who's listening who has a child between the ages of say 13 and
Huh.
18.
Yep.
Okay. It's never not going to be seen,
Okay.
right? You may say to me, well, my kid doesn't have Facebook and I post it on Facebook. Well, guess what? Sally has Facebook, or
Mm.
Sally's mom has Facebook. Johnny has
Right.
Facebook, or his dad has Facebook. It's going to come back. So the fact that it's out there, but in the world is the harm. The fact that the child may have surreptitiously avoided seeing that post for a period of time is inconsequential.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is a terrible thing when, I've seen it, when one divorced parent says something negative to the kid about the ex-spouse, and let alone to let it fly on social media when you don't know how many views, how many, how far it's going to go. I mean, that's just
But play it out in the realest of senses, okay? Because what I find that people have a difficult time understanding, because they're good and decent people, is, well, who the hell is doing this, and what are they saying? I would never do that. I can never imagine. Well, guess what? They do it. So imagine now you've got a 14-year-old boy who's fighting his way through eighth grade awkwardness, or a
yep, yep,
14-year-old girl, right? You make a post, the kid doesn't see it, but the parent does. So now your kid wants to play with that kid's kid, and they say, you know what? They're going through a nasty divorce. Someone's doing something on a video. Maybe there's marijuana. Maybe there's a girlfriend. You know what? Just don't hang out with that kid.
yeah,
Well, and it's just it rears its ugly head in so many millions of ways. And the bottom line is this, and just don't do it. Just don't put your gripes online. I mean,
yeah,
there's a court. There are resources in the court for you to air your grievances if someone does something. Tell your lawyer, tell your therapist, tell the attorney for the children. Just don't spew it online. That's
yeah,
all we're asking the courts to look at.
yeah. No, I think that's good advice, and it's, you want to ask adults to be adults. So what do I have next? So, do you think people are going to fight this? I know we talked a little bit about the First Amendment, but do you think people will fight it, as they can do whatever they want because they have the right to? People love to argue the Constitution. Non-lawyers, like, even they think everything constitutional. It's their constitutional right. They think everything is smoking. They think this and that. Like, do you think people are going to start arguing that?
Well, the way I've presented the issue to judges and lawyers so far that I've spoken to about the issue is this. You have a constitutional right to raise your child, right? The way you see fit, right?
Yep.
Everyone will agree with that. You educate your child the way you want to, you feed him what you want to. You have that constitutional right. When you file a divorce, you give up a little piece of that constitutional right because now you're putting the best interest determination in a judge's hands. You're saying, my spouse and I, we can't agree on what's best for little Johnny or little Betty, so we're going to let the judge decide.
Right.
Or, we can't agree on what school to send them to or whether or not they should be vaccinated for this. So you cede a little bit of control. All I'm asking for, Benny, is while a divorce is pending and you're in front of a judge and that judge has the duty to protect the best interests of the child, during that period of time, you're prohibited. When the divorce ends, you're back to being a free citizen.
Gotcha. Okay.
And do what you want. So you're already giving up some level of rights and
Right.
power when you avail yourself of the courts.
That's okay. That makes sense too. So you know what this, like, when I was going through some of the materials, what this kind of reminded me of, and I might be totally off, is like that whole issue that we saw. Like, I mean, it still goes on, I guess. I don't even want to say the word, but like revenge, PORN, where like people would, post pictures of like ex girlfriends and like whatever, like share them and get in trouble for that. I mean, I don't know if like my thinking's in line with sort of what this is, but it kind of did remind me of that because I think there's some sort of prohibition or some sort of um, there's something involved
Well,
that
in New York, it's against the law. Exactly what you're saying. When
yeah.
you post intimate photos of people, it's against the law. Another thing I try to remind the judges I've spoken to about this is each one of you has signed orders of protection, right?
Right.
So these judges routinely sign orders of protection. What they say is, you are prohibited from going here or going there. You are prohibited from speaking to this person or that person or seeing your children. And one of the things those orders of protection say is you're prohibited from surveilling, uh, copying cell phones. So again, talk about constitutional rights. You do something really, really terrible, judges take your rights away. But yeah, it's against the law to post a lot of this stuff. And
Right.
also the thing that to think about is what these social media posts at their core, the ones I'm talking about, okay? They're not to bring awareness on issues. They're not to seek court reform.
Hmm.
There's so many avenues to do that. And what they're doing, Benny, is trying to embarrass, ridicule, and hurt.
Sure.
I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
talking about a post that says, "Hey, I have some really great ideas on how the divorce court could be better."
Right.
Fabulous. Post that all day long. Call your senator, call your congressman. I'm talking about my spouse did this horrible thing, and here's a video of him or her doing it.
Right. Totally. Um, and you're saying during the divorce proceedings, that should not be something that's allowed to be posted, basically.
Because that's when you've already voluntarily relinquished your rights to a judge, right? I
Right.
can't control you if you're not in front of the court or if you've settled your divorce, and that's a different
Right.
story.
And I think that actually makes it a little more reasonable to sort of look over and monitor if it's like between two litigants. I think that kind of makes it actually reasonable to sort of monitor people's behavior on social media outlets rather than making the scope very broad.
Let me pose one more thing for you that'll make total sense for you. So in New York, and I'm sure it's the same in a lot of different other states, you file a divorce. There's something called the automatic orders, right?
Okay.
So decades ago, people used to file divorce. Oh my God, I got served with a divorce. Let me empty out all my accounts. Let me move money so that my spouse can't find it, right? So in New York, they enacted something called the automatic orders, which the second the divorce gets filed, you cannot transfer, you cannot leverage up your accounts. You cannot take money out of your accounts. There are these automatic orders. So to talk about fundamental constitutional rights, right? The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to control your assets. The courts take that away from you on day one.
Right.
Day one.
Yeah.
So there are so many rights that are I don't want to say infringed upon because they're not infringed, but there's so many rights that are limited when you avail yourself and you ask the court for help.
Mm.
I need your help resolving my family dispute. You got to give a little to get a little.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you don't have those same rights anymore.
Yeah. So tell us about the argument that comes within this, that your children did not give you consent to post about their lives.
Yeah. This is something that's happening in about 8 states right now. What they're basically saying, so this was fueled by initial litigation out of Utah, where a child that got older, I can't remember the exact age, but I think it was about 16, 17, or 18. Mom had posted all this stuff about her.
Mm-hmm.
And here she is years later as a young adult saying, I never gave you consent to do all this stuff. And this stuff is following me. The concept is called digital permanence, right? You know, we all understand. You post something online, it stays around forever. So some states are enacting legislation where when a child reaches a certain age, they can compel a parent to remove those posts, those videos, and
Okay.
those embarrassing things. There are other states that are uh, obviously changing the social media algorithms. There are other states that are changing privacy rules at different ages. There's so much going on right now on this topic that we all have to pay attention to, especially those of us that have children. It's, guess what? Your 12-year-old kid is gonna be 22 in 10 years.
Right.
Those posts aren't going anywhere.
Mm.
Facebook posts are still there.
Right.
And forgive me, even if you've taken them down, what if this concept of TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I post a video on Instagram or Facebook. Some TikToker with 4 million followers picks that up, posts it on their platform. Now, parent removes it from Facebook. Whoopie-doo. It's
Yeah.
now been picked up 27 million times on TikTok.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
that's the problem. Those are the problems we're facing with this stuff. If we let it out of the bag, we have no control of where it goes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's a heavy burden that a party needs to overcome to prohibit the social media post. It can't be annoyance or inconvenience, but it must be clear and present danger. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there's one case where somebody was posting kind of online harassing a doctor's patients, right? And the court said prohibited this person from posting any and all negative comments about spouse act.
Right.
And the court said, no. That's not narrowly tailored. We've got to get to the harm here. And the harm was don't contact the patients. So the idea that when you are going to deal with a First Amendment right,
Mm-hmm.
the prohibition, the order has to be as narrowly tailored as can be
Right.
to accomplish the goal at hand. So, in some of the cases that I've cited, the big leading appellate division cases, in both of them, even though the orders were upheld, the appellate division somewhat fine-tune them to be as narrow as possible because
Right.
they're very considerate of the First Amendment as they should be. And if the harm is let's protect these kids, then there's a really specific way to do that. And mere annoyance. So what the courts really mean by that in some of the case law is, I guess I can't do it without giving some type of a example. But if my wife's lawyer is a jerk,
Mm-hmm.
is different than my wife's lawyer is corrupt and it's causing my child, this common sense approach. We
Right.
as human beings, judges are people, judges are lawyers, and judges are parents. So if the goal is to follow the appellate division's thing is, okay, how do we protect kids in the narrowest way possible? And in my article, I propose language.
Hmm.
Uh, it's really got to, it has to protect against disparaging, harmful posts versus, informational. This process sucks. I hate getting a
Right.
divorce. Divorce
Right.
court sucks. But we'll all concede to that. Okay, we'll all agree.
And we had a judge, Justice Quinn Koba, right, in the Kastanoff case. Like, do you think other judges are going to kind of follow that?
They already are, Benny, and it's music to my
Is
ears.
it
So
just in New York, or is that how it's going so far?
it is not, and I don't have real time data, but ever since starting the campaign, I've been in touch with a ton of lawyers throughout different states, and we've been communicating about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it is by no means only in New York. There are prohibitions being enacted in one shape or another. The difference is it's happening on a small scale, right? It's like
Right.
any change, right? It's like, the nucleus of the problem is this small. If we were to enact a prohibition at a large scale, it would cover everything below. In New York, Judge Quinn Koba took a real bold step. I mean, the only other case out there at the time was a case that said, you can't do this. You
Right.
cannot
Right.
prohibit a First Amendment right, and gave kind of the framework for it. And she, to her credit, said, no, 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 here's how I think it's different. And she was disagreeing with an appellate division case.
Mm.
And I think doing it in such a bold way where she knew that that was going to be challenged and appealed. And she was right. And it was. And the appellate division came back and said, the way you drafted this, the way you did this was exactly right.
Wow.
And when the appellate division decided uh, the Kasanoff case in, I think it was February of 2022, a month later, it affirmed another challenge on those exact same grounds. And so to us lawyers, it's like one appellate division victory is good. Two, on the same grounds, we've
Yeah.
now made law.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very interesting topic, and I think it's really like a new frontier. So you're sort of at the forefront of that. Like, where do you see it going now that you've kind of put that out there? Do you see it evolving at all? How can we, and also how can we help you?
So in my tiny, tiny little part of the world in Westchester
Yep.
County, we have four matrimonial judges, and three out of the four, upon reading the appellate division cases and my article, um, enacted immediate change and put
Wow.
these prohibitions. I think, and I would never speak for a judge, but I think judges are people and humans and parents, but they needed to see and become educated on the fact that that prohibition is actually constitutionally permissible. And here's the higher court saying it is. So when they saw that, they were like, oh, let's do this, you
Right.
know? And the problem is that judges are elected officials and
Hmm.
they have bosses and supervisors. And I believe that nobody really wants to ruffle the feathers of some of the most powerful organizations out there that are
True.
promoting free speech and say what you want, right? So there's a healthy level of skepticism that this can be done. So I do think that it has to be done at a little bit of a snail's pace to begin with. I
Hmm.
don't think New York is going to enact any legislation to do this on a wide
Right.
scale. Although New York has some really good legislation on modifications to algorithms and stuff like that. But if we do this in a small scale, so talk to lawyers who are doing this stuff in Minnesota, in California, in Utah, and there is this kind of movement, which is why I did this as a um, as a campaign.
Hmm.
Stand nothing to gain out of it other than awareness. Not
Sure.
making any money on this. Not
Yeah.
since my time is dedicated to this. If we bring people together and say, you know what, I had this happen in a case of mine. I have a state legislature in Utah that might be interested, has some ideas,
Hmm.
and it starts to combine itself across states. And then I think ultimately we want the American Bar Association to pick up on this, the American Academy of Matrimonial Attorneys. And if they're the ones with the real clout at the legislative level, if we can get them to be interested in this issue and then use their strength with legislatures, then it might become real law. So
Yeah.
that's what we're aiming for.
That's awesome. That sounds great. Very important topic. And congratulations on bringing that really to the forefront. Uh, so, so like, how can we here at Lawyer Stories like help you guys with the cause?
Honestly, I think the number one thing is just sharing of information,
Yep.
right? So if Lawyer Stories was to share my article with as many people as possible, right?
Yep.
And then someone was to reach out from me to me from some other jurisdiction with a story or with an idea. And
Mhm.
look, this was all born out of bad experiences, Benny, right? Some
Right.
bad stuff happened in my cases. I saw people get hurt and destroyed firsthand.
Mm.
And I started to put this together. I'm one person. There are brilliant lawyers out there, constitutional scholars. There's,
Yeah.
like anything that ever gets changed for the better. I can't do this by myself. I mean, we
Yeah.
need real
Yeah.
people out there with real expertise and real knowledge. So just share the article. Anybody that's willing to just educate me on something I don't understand, or let me look at something that I haven't looked at. That's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, social media is so big right now with everybody. I mean, it's been growing, growing. We're definitely going to see these things in the law. So it's like it's so important that we are able to address them, especially as they affect kids. So I just have a couple other questions about. Um,
Please.
Go ahead.
No, I said, please
Oh
do. Yeah.
yeah. So Gus, like, you're a go-to attorney for issues in matrimonial law, and issues that are like insurmountable, like people come to you. So I'm just curious, like, what's your approach for go like handling a matrimonial case? Like, what's the first thing you look at?
I the first thing I do in any case is do a very, very, very deep dive into who you are. If I don't understand your psychology
Right.
and what brings you here, why did it get so bad that you're sitting in my office? Explain to me the hurt and the pain that you felt, what your motivations are. Um, I sometimes people give me weird looks when I ask questions in consultations. So, sure, I do a consultation like everyone else. I see if it's something that I could do, and then I usually schedule if it's something I can get involved in. I usually schedule like a 1 to 2 hour just sit down meeting, and people get uncomfortable because I ask them really tough questions,
Sure. Yeah.
and I need to understand where you're coming from, where you're going, and if your motivations are not in line with what I think is right, whether it's money or kids, um, I don't care if you have all the money in the world, you're not
Yeah.
right for me. So I need
Yeah.
to understand what's your goal? So,
Gotcha.
nobody's goal, Benny, is to just get a divorce.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not. It's well, I want to get a divorce, but only have to pay him 20%. Or I
Mm.
want to get a divorce and I don't want to pay this. Or I want to get a divorce and I don't want that person to have as much time with the kids as I
Ugh.
do.
Yeah.
You've got to understand the motivation. If
Right.
you fail to understand the motivation and you're just thinking about hand me that retainer and let me fill out the forms and go to court, not only are you going to get burned, but you're never going to make that client happy.
Yeah.
Never going
Yeah.
to. The psychology is everything.
So, and excuse me, and along with the psychology, like you've studied, mental illness, personality disorder, drug and alcohol issues. Like, how has your study of those different things helped you in your practice along the way?
Bipolar disorder.
Hmm.
We all hear it. We think, oh my God, you can't parent the children with bipolar disorder. That couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of thousands of people that have bipolar disorder that are wonderful parents.
Yeah.
Uh, you have to know that the key with bipolar disorder is medication adherence. And are you in current therapy? And are you compliant with your medication and pharmacological protocol? If you are, there's there's nothing wrong with co-parenting with someone with bipolar disorder. If you are non-compliant, you don't believe that you need medication protocols, it's not going to go well. Drug and alcohol. You had 4 DWIs. You got fired from 3 jobs for drinking, but you think that you've spent 42 days sober and that you're all good and you don't need any more monitoring.
Right.
No, you need to be sober
Yeah.
for the rest of your life. So you have to understand, read the research. There's so many scholars that write stuff for us matrimonial attorneys to help us understand these issues.
Mm.
Pick up the books, read the studies. National Institute of Health, American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers has constant research there. Read the stuff, understand. If you don't get these things, don't do this. If
Wow.
you're doing it for the money,
Yeah.
you're hurting yourself and you're hurting these people.
That's amazing. Like, okay, so you're a high, excuse me, it's known that you're a highly skilled negotiator. I was wondering if you had any tips on negotiation for any of us.
Ah, be patient. I'll tell you a good story.
Yeah.
I'm a baby lawyer and I'm working with an older guy, and we go to a big mediation. And I just felt so cool to be in a room with
Yeah.
all the people, and these numbers are getting thrown around. And I knew from the client that this was our number. We wanted this number. And the first 20 minutes of the negotiation, they offered a number that was nowhere near what we wanted. And I slapped my hands on my thighs and I started to get up because I thought the right thing to do was show disgust.
Yeah.
And old Lenny Lombardi, he had these huge hands because he was in college. He worked as a butcher, and his hands were just big. He slapped his hand on my thigh, he squeezed it. He goes, "Sit down." He goes, "We're gonna be here all day."
Yeah.
And that was 10 o'clock in the morning. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we were settled. So be patient. Negotiations take time. They take maybe spend an hour just talking about nothing other than what's going on.
Yeah.
What are some of the smaller issues that we could all agree on? Be patient. The stuff develops. If you just try to be that guy like you see in the movies, like, you know, slapping the table,
Yeah.
be
That's
patient.
funny that you did that as a baby lawyer. I love that.
Oh, I God strike me down if I even exaggerated any portion of that story. That's
That's funny.
exactly what happened.
It's a good
If
story.
he didn't grab my leg, I would have stormed out of that room. Case would have never settled.
Guy was a butcher too. He grabbed your leg like it was a piece of chicken or something,
I,
right?
hands like sausages. You would never
That's
believe.
hilarious. That's a great story. And I love that tip too. I mean, I think people love to, be a negotiator and they love to, but I think like hearing a tip from you who's obviously a go-to person where you are in your field is always a nice thing to have. So we thank you for that. So, you're a super lawyer. You're a premier lawyer. You're Avo's client choice. What do all these things mean to you, Gus?
It means that when I'm done with a case, people are happy.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
it means
So,
nothing else. If look, I can tell you this with 100% confidence. I have never resolved the case and gotten the client everything he or she wanted.
right. Well,
Never happened.
yeah.
Never happened. Not in a trial, not in a negotiation. I think at the end of the day, if your client knows you gave it your all, you didn't back down, and that you were smart in protecting the client from him or herself, right? They walk away, they're happy, they give you great reviews, you have all these fancy accolades, but at the end of the day, you don't need to advertise, you don't need to do PR. People refer you to other people. And at the end of the day, this is a word of mouth business,
Sure.
and that's all it is.
So do you focus on a certain type of family, like high net worth, or just like, would you represent like your average family, like your average income? Like, is there a niche like within the matrimonial field that you're looking for?
If you don't have this, the sad thing is that people get married who are worth $100 million, and people get divorced they're worth $100 million. People get divorced for $200,000 in debt,
Yep.
right? Everybody needs lawyer, everybody needs representation.
Yeah.
Um, I always feel that people who are middle class, you know, don't get a lawyer, don't litigate your divorce. You simply don't have enough money to do it.
Mm.
If there are issues of child custody, put that aside. There's nothing you could do. I'm talking about fighting over money. It's silly. Go to a mediator. Go to a mediator, research, go to there's collaborative approaches,
Hmm.
there's arbitrations, a million different resources.
Right.
Financial cases that go to court, Benny, usually involve more money because there are valuation issues, right?
Right. Right.
So what a house is worth, that's easy. What a 401k is worth, that's easy. We're talking about the cases I'm involved in, you know, the wife owns a business that one expert says is worth 2 million, the other expert says is worth 12 million. How are you going to bridge that gap?
Right. Right. You need to bring in a lot of specialists and forensic people and
Right.
that sort of thing.
Right. But
Right.
don't, for God's sakes, if you are having trouble making ends meet and you're not totally and utterly financially comfortable, please don't go hire a lawyer and litigate your divorce if you're just
Yep.
arguing about money. It's just sad. Child custody, which I'm very involved in, I do a lot of.
Hmm.
Um, that's something obviously that has you can't think about money.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to keep the kids safe, and at the end of the day, it's what it takes. If you need a forensic expert, you need attorneys for children. You just got to do what you got to do. Kids are kids, so I don't think money comes into that conversation. But you know, yes, I do high net worth cases.
Hmm.
It's just because I don't want to see people litigate they can't afford it. I mean,
Right.
there are people
Right.
that litigate divorces that wind up filing bankruptcy because they owe their attorneys $60,000.
Just to prove a point to their ex, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah.
know what? Let me
Yeah.
say it another way. How about the lawyer that doesn't tell them, don't do this.
Right.
Don't do
Because
this.
initially, they pay a retainer, then they don't realize probably how much they're going to be going back in court and calling the attorney, and I don't know. It's going to end up costing them a fortune. Um,
They're not given fair expectations sometimes. Uh,
so okay, go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you tell someone, right? So somebody's divorce goes sideways and costs them $100,000. If on day one you say, Miss X, Mr. X, this divorce is going to cost you $100,000, they'd be like, no way, not doing it. But unfortunately, in the beginning, you said, oh yeah, I'll get this wrapped up in a couple of weeks, no big deal.
Right,
You have to be fair with people. You have to tell them, look, I have no
right.
way of telling you exactly what this is going to cost because I don't know how your spouse is going to behave.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
It can cost you 5,000 and cost you 70,000,
That's true.
cost you 300,000. Be fair with people. Let them know you're walking into the wild, wild west.
Makes a lot of sense. So, and finally, like what type of attributes do you think makes a good matrimonial attorney? Like, what do you? Is it emotional intelligence? Is it like being empathetic? Obviously, a skilled negotiator. Like, what would you say is like some of the most important characteristics?
Figure out what each person's motivations are, anxieties, Find out what is at the root cause of everything. You could be a skilled negotiator. You could be all these things. If you don't understand what your client truly needs and wants, and I'm not talking about money, right?
Right.
I'm talking about this has nothing to do with money. This has to do with me finally standing up to him or her after years of being treated like this. You need to understand that. You need to be able to counsel your client to forget about that. Think with the wallet. But if you don't understand it, the most important thing is to understand the psychology and motivations, needs and anxieties of
Yeah,
the people. That's the key. Everything else is secondary.
that's great. I got it. Well, Gus, did we leave anything out today that we didn't?
I hope not, Benny. I hope we covered everything.
I think we covered a lot, and I really appreciate you sharing all that with us. Especially your campaign. It's very important. We'll be sure to help advertise that as we can. And we really appreciate you being here today with us.
I really had a good time talking with you, Benny. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for listening about the campaign. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. You got it. Stay right there. Everybody else, thank you for tuning in. Wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.